Welcome to Engineering 101, your co-op session. Again, my name is Alicia Flatt. I'm a career advisor. I work at the Center for Career Action at the University of Waterloo, and my role is to teach the co-op fundamentals for engineering lectures. I coach students on how to find work for co-op and also how to find work after you graduate. So I work with all students, but I do spend quite a bit of my time supporting engineering students specifically. I am joined today by Haley and Jawad. So thank you so much, Haley and Jawad, for joining us today. These are both co-op students that have gone through a very similar experience that you will by taking the courses that you may be taking, by looking for work that you may be interested in. So we're going to be spending some time learning from them and their experiences. And as some of you may already know, we're going to be focusing today on their resume and learning from them what it takes, what they did when preparing their resume for the first time, so that you can get a sense of what you can do to prepare for your first co-op. Awesome. So before we begin, we want to respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. So the University of Waterloo is situated, as you can see on the map, on the Haldeman Tract, land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on either side of the Grand River. So we make this statement as we move towards reconciliation, and so that we do not further participate in the erasure of that culture or their history. So we want to acknowledge that before we begin. I also want to draw your attention to some of the pre-work that has been posted on Learn already. You may have already seen this, or if this is new to you, you will be able to find it on Learn. And this pre-work is really helpful for moving through with creating that resume that we're going to be talking about. It may seem simple, or it may seem challenging. Either way, it can be very helpful because employers are going to be asking you for certain skills, and it's really helpful if you provide evidence of the skills that you have. So rather than just saying, oh yeah, I learned quickly, show them that you have learned quickly in the past, and that's a great way to get them to believe you further. So I'm just drawing your attention to that pre-work. You may have already completed it, and in that case, great, thank you so much. If not, there's still time, no worries, but it is a really great way to reflect and begin so you can understand how to promote your skills in a competitive process like co-op is. Okay, so that pre-work is creating that T-chart that you saw on the last slide. You'll see it in the Learn community, and reminding you that Learn is that online space where we have added some of the topics that you'll be reviewing. And today we're going to be meeting some of those upper year engineering students to see what their first resume was like. I know a lot of you will be interested in that. We'll have a Q&A to help you prepare for your first work term. And we ask again that you submit all of your questions, as many of you have been, through the Q&A portion. Okay, so rather than the chat, we're going to be using that Q&A button where you kind of see two thought bubbles together, and you'll see that in your toolbar. Questions will be answered by our current co-op students through typing, as well as being answered out loud during the moderated Q&A. So we'll be typing your answers and talking about the answers as we go through, but ultimately this is designed for you to get at what you want to hear about today. So we'll do the best we can there. And then a little bit more preamble. We acknowledge and appreciate you're going to have questions about how COVID is going to affect things. That's natural. We all have questions about how COVID is going to impact the future and what our experiences will be like there. Just a reminder that campus has moved completely online. And so we want to keep everyone healthy, limit exposure. And so for the fall 2020 term, you can expect that courses will be online. I noticed that there was a question earlier, how will I, if I'm in Forestream and looking for a job at fall 2020, how will I do that? There is online. And we already had a very robust online system set up for finding work before COVID ever happened. So it was a very smooth transition to making it completely online for the work search. But that also means that work search help and strategies and coaching, all of the stuff that I do is also completely online for you. So please continue to monitor the university's website, uwaterloo.ca/coronavirus, and that's going to give you all the up-to-date information that you may be looking for, answer any questions that you may have, all that kind of thing. All right. So just as far as timing, we're going to have 30 minutes of presentations and 30 minutes for your Q&A. If possible, please hold your questions until after the presentation is finished, and then use the Q&A box like we talked about. We're all here. There's a bunch of Waterloo staff available for you to answer and respond. And then on our social channels and emails, all of that was going to be provided. So if you want to get in touch with us over Instagram or over email or Twitter or all of those kinds of things, everything will be shared at the end there too. So never fear. We want to answer your questions. We want to make this a really helpful time for you. And so we will have all of those things available. And then a reminder, this presentation is recorded. We all know that the internet can suddenly just go down, if you're worried about potentially missing information that you're really looking forward to hearing about, never fear. You will be sent the recorded version of this presentation at the end. So even if you just missed 5 minutes and are curious about all of the good stuff that you could have been hearing about, you can go back and listen to that recording that will be sent to you later on. And then any follow-up questions will be forwarded through our social media channels, so you don't have to worry about missing out on the really great questions that are being asked either. Okay, so without further ado, I would love if we could have our first architectural engineering student. If you can turn on your microphone and camera, there you are, hello.
Hello.
If you could introduce us a little bit, so you're an architectural engineering student. Can you walk us through some of your experiences as a student and just a quick overview of the co-op jobs that you've had in the past?
Yeah, for sure. Like she said, I am an architectural engineering student in 2A, currently, I believe the most upper year you can get. And I've had, because I'm in 4th stream, I've had 3 co-op opportunities, the 3rd one being my current one. And my first 2 co-ops were at RDH Building Science at 2 different offices. My first one was in the Waterloo office and my second was in the Vancouver office. And generally, you learn a lot of transferable skills that will help you get jobs anywhere. Transferable skills tend to be some of the more important keywords that you'd want on your resume, and at all places you tend to gather some sort of sense of those. And at my first co-op at RDH Building Science in Waterloo, I learned reliability, and in that sense it was I would be given tasks to complete or reports, and you know, being a student for only 4 months and you're giving me reports to write, having no prior experience, it was tough to kind of adapt to that right away. But I worked hard and I would stay overtime if I had to, and I was able to complete everything on time and to a level that they wished for and respected, and had everything sent in a timely manner. And it became good because being reliable means that they trust you, and they were also very keen to have me back for my second semester, which I did in Vancouver. And I would say that I learned my most important transferable skill there was collaboration. Over there, you're in an office where you're constantly around people, the people around you, and you need to constantly work with these people to complete your jobs. Sometimes they'll ask you to do something and you'll need their help to do stuff. And if you can't communicate properly with them or work together properly with them, your job's going to be very hard. I was at a constant state of, you know, needing to cooperate with these people and collaborate with these people so that I could, you know, get my work done at a proper rate. The Vancouver office is a corporate office as well, so it was, you know, bigger projects, and it's very useful to be able to communicate and collaborate to complete those big projects. So that's good. And then Summer Academy Ambassador, which is my current co-op with the University of Waterloo. That is where I learned interpersonal skills. Obviously, I'm constantly speaking with students, as I am right now, and speaking with other people, communicating, and you have to be able to, you know, talk and be able to empathize with people and understand people and acknowledge people's, you know, struggles or reasons and everything. And to this experience would probably be like my best way to learn that and put that on a resume as well. So interpersonal skills.
Yeah, and so when you worked in the Vancouver office, we had a question come in that was addressing, will we have assistance finding a place to live for our co-op period? And so co-op doesn't give you a place to live specifically when you go out on co-op. How did you find a place to live?
So my company actually assisted me. They also gave me a relocation benefit where they kind of helped me, you know, with paying rent, because I am a student. Moving all the way across the country isn't, you know, the most feasible thing for me. On top of that, they got me in contact with their previous co-op, so I can talk to them about how they found their living, or if they could contact me with their previous landlords. I was given all these resources, but I was also able to just find it myself through Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. I was lucky enough to have a very distant contact living in Vancouver that I somehow got in contact with and asked him to check out the place for me before I signed the contract, and that helped out. So
yeah. Oh, that's great. And I want to move through to your resume. So this is the first half of the first page of your resume. And this is what you used when you were a first year, trying first job. Can you walk us through what you decided to include and why you have this softwares and projects section at the top, all of that?
Yeah, so again, this is my first year resume, so none of my technical experience is written on it. And like most of you, I didn't have any technical experience coming out of high school. But the few technical experiences I did have would be, you know, the courses I took in high school, maybe some clubs I took. And I feel like those technical things could be probably the most relevant with the engineering co-ops I'm going to do. And I wanted to put that at the top, because if someone's going to skim through my resume, the first things they're going to see is like, oh, I do have experience with AutoCAD. Oh, I do have experience with Google SketchUp, maybe things that I might be using at the office and stuff. And you might notice that I don't have a specific like skills and you know, software thing where I'm just listing kind of the skills I want. Instead, I decided to bold my most important skills at the start, so that when people are skimming through my resume, they see like AutoCAD. And then if they're interested in specifically AutoCAD, they'll maybe take more time to look at that point, or SketchUp and, you know, all that. So I started off with that to kind of catch the eye of the reader right away. And then I moved on to my more transferable skills in my more, if we can go back to the previous slide.
Oh, yeah.
It's right underneath. In my employment, I worked at two retail stores and grocery stores. And over there, I was able to learn, you know, communication, continual learning. You can see in the bolded writing is where I found probably the most important transferable skills in each of them. So in supervisor at the garden center for one of the stores I worked at, you can see I showed organization, problem solving, and proactivity. And those are things that are going to help you in almost any office. So still having those, I still have some of my transferable skills in my resume despite having technical experience now. So these are all important in almost every job you might take.
And so when you go down, I see you also included extracurricular activities and education as well.
Mhm.
So how did you decide what kinds of information to include on your resume?
Yeah, so they do tend to say, numbers is important, and showing that you received a scholarship, the University of Waterloo recognized you for something, especially because you might not have much to put on your resume at the start. It's always good to have these numbers in. I blanked them out with X's, but you might have more. And also relevant courses and studio design right above that, I felt was important to show, like, hey, I'm taking courses in these, I'm learning these. Your company might be related to this, so it'll help me and help you in just growing in terms of learning. High school diploma, I just wanted to show that I was an Ontario scholar with a certain GPA. Again, you might not have much to start off with, so you wouldn't put your high school diploma, I'd say, after your first or second co-op. So
That's right.
and the extracurriculars was probably my, best University of Waterloo. I was a class representative for architectural engineering starting off, and I was also the program lead for architectural engineering and engineering ambassadors. And these two things are both, basic, but also important for the civil environmental department and engineering altogether. And this could be moved like up and down, but I felt like my technical experience and transferable skills would be more important than this. And
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is the actual order of your resume, you get to pick what's the most important. So you
yes,
put stuff that you think is really important for the employers to know higher up. And so I got a question from one student asking if they should include awards or extracurriculars from high school on their resume. And so what would you say to that?
I would say if you find them, in many cases, they will be relevant, whether it be transferable or technical. Yes, you should include it. Again, they know you're coming out of high school. They know you're a 1A student for the most part. So they're not thinking like, oh, wow, he just received an English award from high school. Like, no, that's important. They show that you worked hard to get that. You were a top student. And anything you put on a resume that you find helpful will help you. So.
Absolutely. Ultimately, employers want to know, are you good at stuff? And so if you have some sort of record of showing, yes, I was good at stuff before, that's a good strategy to keep in mind. Awesome.
Mhm.
And before we move on to Haley, if there's one tip that you could give students, that you'll have chances to talk more to students in our Q&A, but is there one kind of tip when writing a resume or getting ready for that first work search that you would want to give students?
Yeah, I give this tip to almost everyone when I help review or write resumes, and it's bold your words. Bolding to me has always shown, I even as someone who edits resumes would tend to skip through a resume, but if you have bolded words, it shows like, okay, these are the most important. And like I said earlier, you're just, looking through, and if something catches their eye, they're gonna take time to read the whole thing. I don't have just like AutoCAD listed. I don't have just SketchUp listed. It's all like written within my descriptions. And if it catches their eye through the bolded words, they'll tend to read kind of what I did with that software, and not just the
Right.
fact that I know that software.
And you're not bolding words randomly. You're
No.
thinking, what does an employer really care about? How do I get that word onto the resume and how do I get it seen? So yeah, all of that reflection really makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to Haley. Hello, Haley. If you can turn on your mic and camera, then we can get started chatting about your experience here as well.
Great. Hi, I'm Haley. Do you want me to just start or?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm going into 2B of environmental engineering in the fall. So I just finished my 2A term and I'm on co-op right now. So some of the previous co-op experiences that I've had, kind of all over the place. My first one was for a very small sales rep firm that sold like commercial roofing. So very like civil based, but still within the realm of environmental engineering. And it was a really small company. So one of the like transferable skills that I had to learn was communication, because I was constantly like attending meetings with them and communicating with them, as well as like a large part of my job was emailing and contacting architects and general contractors. So I was on the phone a lot. And yeah, just like communication in all sense. I really had to like fine tune that and get comfortable talking on the phone, which I know is like scary for some people. It definitely was for me. So that's something that I took away from that job for sure. My second co-op job was in Ottawa at Environment Canada, and I was working in a really small like lab, and most of the time I was by myself. So it was up to me to sort of manage my time and ensure what I was doing was like preparing samples. So I had to ensure that they were getting to like other labs on time, and prioritize what things needed to be done first. So again, time management was something that I definitely learned at that job. And then my third co-op job, and also probably one of my most favorite ones, was as a LEAF teaching assistant for the university, and that was for the Civil Enviro Geo Concepts course. And there it was a lot of like peer mentorship and running labs and tutorials, and just like leadership, leading students through like how to do certain things in AutoCAD and Civil 3D was super fun. And yeah, so there I learned leadership. And right now, as the same as Jawad, I'm a summer academy ambassador. And here I'm sort of just learning everything. Like it's a new experience. We're in like an online environment, so adapting to that has been really challenging, but also interesting to sort of like go through. Everyone is still learning sort of how to navigate the online experience. So like doing that with a bunch of other co-op students and like really positive supervisors has also been super great. I think you're muted, Alicia. Sorry.
I just muted myself just as I went to start talking. And so what would you say as far as getting that experience? Did you find, what kinds of jobs are there available for environmental engineering? That was one question that we got.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different jobs available depending on like what you want to do. There's a lot of sort of government jobs, so like at the municipal level, as well as like other forms of government, I guess. As well, there's like a lot of research jobs if that's what you want to do. Like I know the university has some that are like more tailored to environmental engineering, and some of your upper year course professors will sort of like recruit you and say like, hey, do you want to do a co-op doing research, which can be super good, especially if you want to go to grad school. I know some people look at that. But yeah, in terms of just like working at civil engineering firms is something that environmental engineers do too, because again, like your first year courses are exactly the same throughout civil, enviro, and geo. You take exactly the same courses, so you'll have the same experience.
Right. And we did just get a question. What would be your experience working abroad or even working outside of Toronto or the GTA as far as like the cost of living and expenses? And you went to Ottawa. Can you tell us a little bit about, you didn't go internationally, but you did go far away from Waterloo. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was definitely different moving away from home and not being able to just like call your parents and ask them to bring you medicine or something. Like I don't know what you'd need them to bring you, but yeah, it's sort of just, it gives you like a sense of independence, but also like knowing that like your supervisors and your coworkers are still there for you, and they understand that it's sort of like a big step to move out of city, out of province, or like even out of country if that's what you want to do. So I think just like drawing on your network, and like if you need help, they understand and they can probably help you. You just need to like tell them that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. So I'm gonna get you to walk us through your resume. So this is the first half of the first page of your resume. Can you chat with us about some of the decisions you made in your first year when looking for co-op?
Yeah, so I wanted to put some of my qualifications, sort of like the things, sort of like Jawad, like what I wanted employers to see first at the top. So showing some of those soft skills as well as some of the technical skills that I had been learning in my 1A term. So like AutoCAD, field surveying, Microsoft Office, all things that you'll probably learn throughout your first term. And then I put my education. Again, it's sort of up to you what order you want to put things in. And some people will tell you a different thing, but I just put mine second. And then I got into my work experience. So I worked during the summer at a like geochemical analysis firm, sort of just like sorting rocks. Like that was my job. It was sorting rocks, but then like you sort of have to make that sound not so mundane on your resume, which I tried to do. And then, yeah, I also worked at Walmart, which also shows like a lot of soft skills. And if that's like one recommendation, it would be like if you can get a part-time job or a volunteer opportunity during the summer to show employers that you have those transferable skills and you can put something on your resume, that's a really good idea as well.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever considered an international opportunity for co-op?
Yeah, I definitely would consider it. I tend to go through Waterloo Works for most of my, all of my jobs so far, which is like the job posting system that Waterloo has. And I'll apply to them and stuff, but they typically usually will want like upper year students with lots of experience. Not to say it can't be done if that's something like you're really rooting for. But yeah, I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have received a number of questions in our question and answer about would working abroad still be possible during COVID and the current circumstances. So I want to address that a little bit. So we can't go against federal law. So if there's travel bans in certain places or we can't allow students to leave a country to go to work, then we have to follow that. And so we're keeping a close eye on where students are able to travel. We are allowing remote work in international countries. And if you are currently living in a different country than Canada, it is possible to find work within your country. And so whether or not you'd receive a co-op credit or whether a co-op credit is necessary, all of those things we would be able to discuss with you individually. Ultimately, our goal is to keep you safe, but also keep you to be able to reach your goals. And so you would be able to chat with a career advisor like myself to learn what is it exactly that you're looking for. Do you live in Toronto and you want to do a remote work experience from San Francisco? We can talk about that. Or are you currently living in Pakistan and found a job in Pakistan and want to see if you can get co-op credit for it? A career advisor would be happy to chat with you about all of those situations as well. Yeah, so let's move on to the second page of your resume, Haley. So what else did you include here?
Yeah, so I also included volunteer experience. So a few things that I did a few summers before, and then also during the summer going into university. Yeah, I co-organized a movie night. So that sort of shows like that soft skills where you're taking initiative to plan and organize and execute a task can be super like transferable to really any job you're doing those sorts of things. And then in terms of projects, I included some of the things that I learned in 1A, like in the concepts course. So when I was in 1A, we created a functional servicing report for a parking lot. You guys will be doing not the architectural students, the geo, civils, and enviros will be doing a culvert replacement report, which is not similar, but kind of similar, not similar in the content, but similar in the styles of writing and the experience that you'll get. You'll be like shown how to go through the design process and pick a certain design type, and then you'll have to like write a report about it. And your course professor, Bob, will take you through all of that, and it'll be super great. But you'll also be working in groups, so that's like another skill, teamwork, collaboration, lots of things that you can put on your resume that you'll be learning in 1A. And then ArcGIS, that's another thing. If you can join like a club or a design team in 1A, what I did was joined the Geospatial Club, which is basically just a club that you go to workshops and they teach you how to use ArcGIS, which is program that a lot of employers use or like want to see that you have that skill, but it's not something that is taught in the program. So to show that you've taken that initiative to go outside and learn this program in sort of like a safe environment is also super good. But any design team or like skill that you've shown to take initiative is also good. And then I just included at the very end some activities and interests just to show employers that there are like other things that I do outside of school. And sometimes if you're in like an interview with an employer, that's like all they want to talk about is, you know, oh, I played rugby in high school and this was my position and what did you play and that sort of thing. And it can be really great conversation starters within interviews.
Mm-hmm. And one question we have was, how competitive was it to find an environmental engineering job?
Well, you're competing against your classmates and also like the upper year students. So it's definitely challenging to get your first co-op position. And I would say like a really great way to sort of combat that is not be super picky. So if you are only looking for a government job in Waterloo in a certain department, it's probably less likely that you're going to get that job. But if you're open to like new experiences, I didn't know what a sales rep firm was, but I learned a lot of great things. And that was like my first co-op experience. It wasn't super environmental engineering, but I learned a lot of like civil principles and I was reading architectural drawings and stuff. So I would say like, yeah, it is difficult and challenging to get your first co-op term, but the best thing you can do is like be open to new experiences.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really great. Okay, so that is our first half hour. Thank you so much for walking things through, Haley and Jawad. I think all of your tips are going to be really helpful moving forward. So at this point, we want to open the floor up to answering more questions. So Daniela is going to facilitate our question and answer. I just want to remind you that if you have very specific questions or even like academic questions, like why do I have this course, or can I switch programs, or any of those kinds of things, firstyear.engineering@uwaterloo.ca is going to be the way to do it. I also want to highlight that we have virtual co-op consults available. And if you wanted to talk to somebody about your resume between July 20th and July 31st, we're offering 15-minute drop-ins for co-op consults for any incoming students. And we'll provide a little bit more information about that later on, but we do have one-on-one supports available for the rest of July for you. And I might tune in every once in a while if there's a technical detail or something that I just want to add, but otherwise feel free to ask your questions and we can get going.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. And thanks so much, Haley and Jawad. You guys have shared so much useful information already. So I'll get to some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A and a few other questions that we wanted to ask you as well. So first question is for Haley and Jawad. Can you speak about the student competition for positions and maybe about the average pay, if you're able to share kind of what that pay scale looks like within your programs? And then maybe Alicia, if you want to speak to the other programs, Civil and Geological, because we have students from those programs on as well. Haley, did we want to start with you?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of average pay, it's sort of very similar to what's on the co-op website. I think my first job, it paid like, I was very impressed with it, honestly. Am I allowed to say? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like $18 an hour, which I was like blown away by at the time. But yeah, in terms of like what the average pay is, some people will get paid minimum wage. Other people will get paid a lot more than that. And it sort of just depends on what the job is and what the company is. Research jobs tend to pay less, and government jobs also tend to pay a little less. But like private companies usually pay more, but it just depends. And what was the first half of the question? Sorry.
The students were asking about the competition for each role. So do you find that there's a lot of competition among your classmates for the roles that you apply to, and what's that like?
There's definitely competition, but in terms of like how intense it is, it's very friendly. Like, you know who is getting what interviews. So say they're interviewing like 3 people and 2 of them are also in your class. It's, at least in my class, it's very like friendly, like, oh, how'd the interview go? Like you're helping each other prepare for the interviews and stuff, because you're all preparing for the same one kind of thing. So in that sense, it's like almost like community bonding. And people know, like people understand that if there's one position and 3 people are being interviewed, 2 people aren't going to be happy. But it's just sort of how it goes.
Great. Thanks, Haley. Jawad, did you want to add to that at all about what your experience has been like competition wise, and then maybe kind of the average pay in each term?
Yeah, I think in terms of pay, Haley kind of covered it all.
Mhm.
The average you'll get is 18. That tends to be like what most people got in my program. But like you said, some people will get less, some people will get more. I was lucky enough to be on the latter. But in terms of how competitive it is, again, kind of copying what Haley says, specifically in architecture engineering, because when you do come into the real life section, you're always in the same studio, you're always in the same class. You tend to build a really close bond with your classmates. Like I know all my classmates' first name, last name, like everything they do, we're all very close. And through that, there's not much of a competitive look at like, oh, he got a job and I did, he got the job. You potentially hear jokes about it, but nothing like anger. In terms of like, I'm assuming what they're asking is like, do people struggle to find jobs because of how many students there are? Your program director, and for architecture engineering specifically, it is Scott Walbridge. He does actually a really good job to find as many jobs as possible for you, and he's constantly working at that. He's constantly reaching out to companies and all that, and he's already improved it significantly from when the program just started, when I was in it. And I'm assuming once we have now 2 classes being in one semester for the first time, he's going to do his work to find enough positions to accommodate for that. So I would say that it shouldn't be as competitive as you might be scared it might be. So
Awesome. Thanks, Jawad. Alicia, we had a couple questions come in from students about students who want to find their own job outside of Waterloo Works. And how do they know if it will qualify as a co-op job and they'll get credit for it?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So we absolutely encourage you to look for jobs outside of Waterloo Works, and that might mean looking at other job boards, or it might mean just asking friends or family or your old high school teachers, hey, do you know anybody that I should chat with about finding a co-op job? If you end up getting an offer for a position, you can reach out to us to see if that is something that we would be able to give you co-op credit for. So there is the co-op consults, which are just like 15-minute chats, either over the phone or Zoom. So you can just ask a few questions to a career advisor like myself. Or we have a digital online form where you tell us all of the information about the position, and we would be able to see if it's available for co-op credit. Ultimately, if it's a position that you're really interested in, that seems cool, that uses skills that would be helpful later on, we want to work with you so that you can achieve your goals. So you would never just hear someone say, no, that's not good enough, and move on. We would work with you. So if you found a great opportunity, how can we make sure that we can get you a co-op credit for that position?
Okay, awesome. And I know you mentioned co-op consults. When are those available to the incoming students? One of the students mentioned they were looking in the system to see if they could book one already. When do those become open for our incoming students?
Yeah, so I should be able to provide a link later on at least, but we have those virtual consults available now for students until July 31st. Normally we wouldn't offer them until you've already started in September, but for this limited time, we're going to let you kind of connect with us right here. So the actual link, I can look for you to send it along so you can have that available.
Okay, thanks so much. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to Haley and Jawad, How many positions would you normally apply for? Specifically for your first co-op term, if you can go back to that, do you remember how many you applied for? And how many interviews did you get the first time? Haley, can we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. So my first term, in main round, I think you have 50 opportunities to apply for jobs, so like 50 job applications. Personally, I used all 50 because I had heard what Uprooters had said, like it's sort of your hardest time to get a job. And I think I got 3 interviews, but I know some of my friends didn't get any interviews or they got more interviews. It sort of depended on what jobs you were applying to. If all of your jobs were like senior positions at top firms in Silicon Valley, you like probably weren't going to get interviews in your first term. But it also just depended on like your previous experience. But yeah, so I used all 50. I got 3 interviews, and then I ended up getting the MJ Building Envelope Solutions, the sales rep firm job, in one of those interviews, which was super great. I didn't have to go into continuous.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. Jawad, do you remember what it was like for you, your first co-op term?
I'm trying my best to remember, but I think I only applied to, like Haley said, you get 50 in your main round, then it increases to 300, I believe. And I think I only applied to 50 altogether. That being said, I only got 1 interview to a company that didn't hire me. And then I had used my connections. I used my professor for your concepts course, John Straub. He's one of the top building science names in the whole world. So I was lucky enough to have a close relationship with him. He got me in contact with this company that he also works with. And I landed a really, really good senior position. So to start off with, I was very lucky, and purely out of just like, my ability to talk and like contact with people. And because I was so involved, he wanted to help me out with the same thing. So I was lucky.
Awesome. And I think that's a great point that, the relationships you have with your professors and the people at the university can also be helpful when looking for co-op roles, because sometimes there are things outside of the box that we don't always think of. So that's a great point. We also had some students asking about ArcEng. So Jawad, just to go back to you again, because the program is so new, I think you mentioned this a little bit, there were maybe fewer jobs at the beginning, but that really seems to be growing, the pool of jobs that are available. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit. You've seen that yourself, that there are more and more jobs being added to the system as the program grows.
Yeah, so for our first semester, we weren't allowed to apply to architecture jobs, but now we've been in line with the architecture co-ops as well. So now we get to apply to our regular ArcEng and civil eng co-ops, as well as the architectural firms, with a portfolio if you do to specify to architectural firms. And there's a lot more positions. It's a lot less competitive. Essentially what you would expect with generally how many positions they'd give to most co-op programs anyway. So I think they've done a really good job. A lot more companies now know what architectural engineering is. That was always the first question we would get, like, so what is ArcEng? But now companies are coming in with that knowledge already, and they aren't asking us to just come up with something as a student who's only been in the school for 4 months, not even knowing what engineering is, let alone what ArcEng is. So it's definitely a lot better now.
Awesome. Alicia, a few students are asking about the timelines for co-op. Can you share what sort of the traditional timeline looks like when they start applying, interviewing, resumes, all that? I know we covered a lot of it, but maybe just to
No, that's great. The first thing that I want students to remember is the information I'm about to tell you is not going to be the only time you're going to learn about this. So when you're in your recruiting term, which is the term before you go out on your work term, you are going to be taking the co-op fundamentals for engineering. And so you're going to have somebody explain this to you. You're going to be a part of an online learning that gives you all of this information, and we have it all over our websites. If you ever wanted to look up co-op important dates, you can also look that up. But ultimately what we see is for that first month of your recruitment term, so if fall is when you're going to start looking for a job, it would be September, you would have some jobs being posted on Waterloo Works over the course of 2 weekends, and you're going to submit your applications there. The second month of your recruitment term, so October, is when you would have those first round of interviews where you could potentially be called in for a Zoom or phone interview. And then you would be able to actually see how employers ranked you at the end of that, of October or early November. You would find out if employers wanted to hire you, and you could you would say, yes, I want this job, or no, or rank the kind of what you want. And then you would see if you're employed by early November. And then if you don't find a job, which is very common for your first work term, for you to not find a job by end of October, early November, then you move into applying again through Waterloo Works through November and December. During this entire time, you're also able to look for your own work and chat with a career advisor if you found something that you're pretty excited about and you want to be removed from the Waterloo Works process. So that's kind of a very brief overview, but again, you get up-to-date information as you move through your program, so you won't just kind of be lost in looking for it.
Awesome. And just because a couple of students have asked, if a student cannot find a job in their first term, what happens then?
So we don't kick you out of the program. You're not all is lost for you, certainly. You have extra time to find work. So if your job is supposed to start in January and you haven't found it yet, we give you all of January and into February, and potentially even getting close to March to find an opportunity. And so there's still definitely a lot of extra time that we provide students, but also every program is designed that you have more opportunities to get a co-op credit than you need to graduate. So in engineering, if you have 6 opportunities to find co-op, you only need 5 to graduate. And we've also added a little bit more leniency in if COVID is impacting your work search, so making that easier too. Ultimately, we want you to be successful. We'll give you all of the tools, and you will never be just kind of on your own looking for something without support or somebody checking in. So it is possible to not get a job for co-op. That's why it's a competitive process. We don't give you jobs. But what it can also tell you is what's not working in my resume or what happened in that interview. And I would so much rather you be a first-year student and learn that early on, oh, this is what I need to do to improve, than in other schools with other programs, they end up finishing a 4-year degree, they're unemployed for 6 months after they graduate, and then they realize their resume is needing improvement. So this gives you an opportunity. If you're gonna fail early, fail hard, and then get better and move on from there. So co-op gives you the opportunity to do that in a really safe space. And I think that's one of the best reasons to pursue co-op.
Thanks, Alicia. I think that's a really, really great point. And on that note, to go back to Haley and Jawad for a second, when you were applying for co-op roles, or when you are applying, what do you find is the most important element of your resume, or what do you get asked about the most? Is it your grades, personal projects, your professional experience, volunteer experience, or is it just kind of different no matter, depending upon the interview? Haley, you mentioned something interesting about, rugby and somebody wanting to talk about rugby and those personal elements of your resume. So what have you found in your co-op interviews that people tend to ask about the most, and what stands out on your resumes?
Yeah, I've never had an employer ask about grades, which is interesting. They usually don't care, provided they're decent, but if they're gonna give you the interview, they probably don't care too much about grades. I've always gotten questions about the extracurriculars and the hobbies section on my resume, sort of what you do in your spare time outside of school. Everyone will have the same amount of experience coming in from high school. You may have had a part-time job. They know that, and they typically don't care too much. So yeah, they just want to know sort of about you to see if you're a good fit for the company, if you're willing to learn. Those sort of like soft skills they're really looking for.
Awesome. Jawad, has it been similar for you as well, or anything interesting that people tend to focus on in the interviews?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of give Haley the thumbs up, in the sense that she had an interest section in her resume, and I didn't, and I think that's one of my bigger regrets because, like she said, like a lot of the times you'll get an interview and all they want to talk about is like, oh, you play basketball? I play basketball too, or like, what's your favorite team? It's like, I'm here for an engineering interview. Why are you talking about basketball? But it's true. It's like a lot of them just want to know. It's like, are you a good fit for our team? In the sense of like, can you talk to our team? Can you be like, would our team enjoy your presence and all that? And so like, if they can talk to you, if your interview seems more like a conversation over an actual interview, it's a lot more, impressive to them. And on top of that, like, being in fourth stream, and I believe Haley's also in fourth stream, like you don't always know much in your first interview and they don't expect it. But if you can show like you're willing to learn, like you're passionate, um, that's what they like. Like I said, my first co-op was a senior position. Why are you hiring someone who's been in school for, at the time, only 3 months, to be in the senior position? And when I asked my employer after I got hired, of course, he had said like, we showed that you were like always interested in learning. Like he would show me around the office. It was like, do you know what this is? I'm like, no, but I'm willing to learn what it is. Like, and I would show like, oh yeah, I'm actually interested in like seeing what you have to tell me, seeing what this job is about. And he liked that. He saw that potential, and I think I did a good job in that co-op. So yeah, I think those two things are very important.
Great. That's a really good point. And for students who are looking to get involved, so once they start in the fall, what are some of the things like extracurriculars? I know it's a little bit different this year, but a lot has gone online and is virtual. But what are some of the things that you guys got involved with when you started, or maybe you took a little bit of time to figure out what you wanted to join, but student teams or any extracurriculars or some of the things that your friends do that might help also build up your resume and give you some transferable skills?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I joined the Geospatial Club. I joined it with a lot of my friends, so we kind of like all did it together so we could all put it on our resume. Because of COVID, I think now if you want to join like a design team or something specific, like a specific club, you email them directly and there's a website that sort of like has a list of them all. But in terms of like joining something, if you can, like definitely do like join a few things and then see what you like best and like don't stick with them all. You don't have to, or you can if you want, if you find you have time. But you'll probably find you don't have a whole lot of extra time. But one or two, like to supplement your resume and to like learn some new skills, can be super beneficial.
Great. Yeah, and Erica will share the link in the chat that you were just mentioning, Haley, to the Student Design Team website so that you guys can see some of the other teams that are available. Jawad, did you have any extracurriculars or anything that your friends did outside of the class that you started sort of once you began university?
Yeah, so once I began university, it was KEGS, which is the Civil, Environmental, Geological, and now Architectural Engineering Society. And that is where we kind of have meetings. We attend conferences just about, civil environmental department all across Canada, where you talk about how your university is involving them and all that. And my second one was engineering ambassadors, where I would go to university fairs and all that. And those are helpful because it shows that you're actually interested in your program, what you're learning, you're interested to talk to people, you're good at talking to people. And I was lucky enough where I'd kind of developed a relationship with my whole program prior to even going to school, just through Facebook Messenger. And you have to be voted on to get these positions, and I went up and they were all just like, yes, Jawad, because they all know I was the only person they knew. So so I was lucky enough to kind of get those clubs in early. And then after my first semester, I started I started doing Warrior Home, which is the most related to architectural engineering in terms of literally every aspect they do in Warrior Home will help you in your job search in that they have an architectural side, a building science side, and building envelope side, a construction side. Like everything will help you. And construction might not seem helpful, but my first 2 jobs at RDH, like I said, a senior position, their biggest thing that they wanted out of me was construction experience. They kept on saying, like, even if you had built a basement, like, put that on your resume, because people need to see, like, you know how to build things, you know how buildings work generally, even like a skeleton of building a basement and stuff. So those are things like, you know, having all these experiences like are huge for your program. And I would say Warrior Home if you're an arch eng for sure.
Nice. So all those like home renovations we've been doing during COVID will come in handy. Put that on your resume. That's great. Alicia, we did cover a little bit about residence and where to live when you're on co-op and that type of thing, but we had kind of a specific question. If a student is in residence and then they go away to do a co-op term, and they want to come back to residence, do they come back to the same room, or how does the process work with res?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with residents, they know that you're a co-op student. There's a lot of co-op students, so they would recognize that. So you would never be charged for living in residence during your co-op term if you're not actually living there. And so they would expect you to move out of your room in most cases, fully move out of your room, and then you might be put back into the same room again, but it's possible that that wouldn't work out and you would be in a different room. So you would fully move out of your residence space, move to wherever it was that you were going to be doing your co-op work term, and then you move back. And it is possible to arrange it that maybe you found a job within Waterloo when you want to stay in that residence room. You can talk to residents about that and they can be fairly flexible with that. But for your first year in residence, you would pay to live there for 8 months, and it might be 4 months and then a break and then 4 months when you come back for your next academic term, or it could be the 8 months straight.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's probably too important to note this year that the residence is open. So students can move in September, and in the event their co-op term is virtual, their first term, they could just do it from there if they wanted. So there's the benefit of like strong Wi-Fi, you know, being on the university campus, those kinds of things. I mean, Wi-Fi, I think, is one of the biggest challenges of our times right now. I know it is in my house anyway. So it's maybe a consideration for those thinking about residence and where to live for the fall and then into your co-op term. And maybe on that note, if Haley and Jawad, if you could speak to what it's been like, sort of a virtual experience and sort of doing co-op remotely, if you have yet, or if you're going to be in your next term. And, you know, just any recommendations you have for the students around any like computer requirements or software or anything like that that might make it easier, or if it's just basic, then that's great too. But have you had to, you know, have a certain type of computer system or any software? We had a couple questions come in about that. So Haley, maybe we could start off with you.
Yeah, so in terms